Hey there everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. I have a project that I wanted to share. It was something that I actually was just inspired to create. I was struggling actually when I was in the middle of creating some cards, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go a completely different direction. I'm going to pick something that I really truly love to do. And for me, that is ink smushing. I absolutely love ink smushing. I talk about this a lot, how I use ink smushing as kind of my kickstart into crafting and getting me back into a creative groove. So the project I was working on, I completely abandoned. And so today's video is going to be showing you what I made instead. And I'm going to walk you through what I did. And also, hopefully, you're going to be able to get some ideas from the project that I'm sharing today using the new distress color from Tim Holtz, which is Saltwater Taffy. I actually shared a project recently, which I have on screen right now, and there's a link to it in the top right corner. Even if you aren't a mixed media artist, this is a project that is very approachable. And so if you've ever been inspired or interested in wanting to try out some mixed media projects, this is an easy one. It's really simple, and it uses the new Saltwater Taffy color with some other newer distress colors from Tim Holtz. This one's going to be completely different. This one actually is going to be utilizing Saltwater Taffy with yellow. But before I start the ink smushing, I want to show you what I'm using today. So I have this really beautiful etched daisy die from Simon Says Stamp and this leaf canopy die. And it's going to look really pretty as a background behind our daisy. I also have some Strathmore Bristol paper. I have a stamp pocket, which is what we're going to use to do our ink smushing, and I'll talk about that as we go along. So these are the colors that we're going to be using today to do our ink smushing. So you'll notice we've got wild honey, squeezed lemonade, scattered straw, spiced marmalade, and saltwater taffy. Now you don't have to use these exact colors, but I would encourage you to pick out some nice varieties of yellows that you have in your stash and pair them up with saltwater taffy because it's going to look amazing. Okay, so on my desk here, I am going ahead and laying my stamp pocket on top of my Simon Says Stamp magnetic glass mat. And I'm going to smush that ink onto the stamp pocket and spritz it with water so we get these beaded up areas of ink. Then I'm going to use the stamp pocket to lay that color into my project. And I'm working on two pieces of paper at the same time because I knew that that die was quite large and it was going to fill up pretty much the entire sheet of paper. So I wanted to make sure that I had enough room to die cut that flower twice. We're going to work on layering those different colors of yellows, oranges, and of course saltwater taffy onto these two pieces of paper. And one of them I'm particularly going to leave a little bit lighter than the other on purpose. So that way I get a darker layer for the underside of the flower, and then the top layer of the flower will be the lighter portion. Now you'll notice that I'm using this stamp pocket to transfer my ink onto my paper instead of putting the ink directly onto my craft mat. And that's because I like to maintain control when I'm ink smushing. I do not like to be surprised with how this is going to turn out. Even though you're never going to be able to completely control ink smushing, this helps me maintain that control, and so I can place things where I want them and I'll know generally how it's going to turn out. It also allows me to take advantage of those fun dots that you can get, that nice texture of color, and I really love those, that speckled effect. So I love being able to maintain the control with that stamp pocket so that I can place those little dots of color where I want them. And when I'm working on these backgrounds, I'm using the same color sometimes more than once because you can never layer too much color on these backgrounds, especially when you're using distress inks. They're slightly translucent, so you're going to get these really nice layers of color and new shades in between. So I'm splattering these papers with water now so that way I can get some nice water spots. When I do this, I actually generally like to go ahead and dry the water spots just a little bit because it kind of forces them into the paper a bit more. And then I lift off the rest of the water to reveal that nice splatter effect. Now, of course, I'm a splatter girl, so I definitely wanted to make sure I threw in some splattering here and there, and that is going to be done with some Wild Honey Distress Spray Stain. So I just let that dry, and then I'm ready to do some die cutting. So there are two parts to this daisy. And I thought it would be a little bit more realistic to die cut the bottom layer of the daisy with the darkest panel, and then the lighter panel is going to die cut from the lighter layer. I also want to die cut the center of the flower one more time, and I used the darkest corner that I could find in my paper. I'm going to trim out that center so that I can pop it up on top of my flowers, and we're going to get that really nice dimension and nice contrast for that flower. Now I thought I would add a little bit more saltwater taffy to this, and I just love how the saltwater taffy mixes with the yellows so beautifully. It creates this corally orange, and then in spots you have like these nice bright pops of pink. So I think this is a really fun color to mix with yellows, and I'm really having fun seeing this flower come together. So you can generally see what we're going to end up with here by the time we glue everything together, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But I need to create a background, or some leaves I should say, for this flower, and you saw that I had that flower canopy die. Well, I have these distress inks. These are salvage patina, bundled sage, rustic wilderness, and peeled paint. So these are the colors that we're going to use to do the green for our background of the flower. Again, we're going to use that stamp storage pocket to help put the ink onto our project. And don't forget that when you're working with this technique, the amount of water you add to your ink is going to change the look of how the ink puts down onto the paper. So if you use a lot of water, you're going to get a more looser and very soft application of ink versus something like this where I'm using bundled sage and I didn't add quite as much water. I ended up with some more concentrated ink. So just play around with it. See how you like the application, whether you put a lot of water down or just a little. For peeled paint, I did a lot of water so I could get some of that nice yellow green throughout this background to really make those leaves come to life. And then I'll just add more additional layers on top because that's what's fun. With Distress inks being translucent, you're going to get these layers and the fun multicolor that comes out of those layers because of the way that the colors overlap. So I think this is a really great way to be able to create some beautiful backgrounds and de-stress, kind of allow your mind to not think so hard. Allow yourself to just play and be creative. And then if you feel like turning it into something, I love using die cuts to help me do that. So we're going to die cut this background with that vine canopy die, after of course I add some water splatters. That's one of the best things about Distress inks is their water reactive properties. So you're going to get this really cool water splatter effect when you do this. And it doesn't matter that these inks have already been wet. They're water reactive literally forever. So you're always going to be able to get those water reactive properties even if you've already added water to them before. Okay, unfortunately, I have to pause it right now because somehow I did not capture me die cutting the vine canopy die on my camera. I'm so sorry. I ended up die cutting this vine canopy twice. One from that background that we worked on, the beautiful greens, and then the second time I die cut it, which was from some white cardstock. Now what I did was I put the negative pieces of the vine canopy onto my card base using the positive of the die cut to help me place them in the exact location that I needed them to be to line up with the actual die cut itself. So those negative pieces I just glued down with some liquid glue right onto my card base, and then the white portion of the vine canopy that I had die cut is going to go over top of that. And because we use the vine canopy die cut as the guide for placing these little negative pieces onto our card base, that lines up perfectly, and we're going to get this really nice layered effect. So we have colored leaves and then the white outline, which is nice and soft, but it fills everything in really nicely, and it doesn't make the background too busy for our nice flower that we're going to put on top. So sorry for not catching that on camera. I don't know what happened there. So what I'm doing now is I'm putting the flower together. On the back side of the base layer of the flower, I'm going to go ahead and put some 3D foam squares onto it and pop that up. So this has a nice bit of dimension here. Now I want to glue the next layer of the flower on, but I want it to be slightly dimensional, but not too thick like the first round. So this time I'm going to use thin 3D foam squares from Scrapbook Adhesives, and that's going to give me just a teeny bit of dimension over the flower layer underneath. so that our flower has some lift and it looks dimensional, but it's not super bulky, which I love. I'll use those same thin 3D foam squares to attach the center of our flower. And those thin 3D foam squares are super handy. They come in both 1/4 and 1/2 inch sizes. So our flower is put together. It's looking really cute. But now we need to add a sentiment. And I thought I'd keep it simple and just use a Simon Says stamp sentiment strip. But we're going to step that sentiment strip up. I have an embossing dauber here from Tim Holtz, and I'm going to apply embossing ink over top of the sentiment strip, which is from the All the Thanks sentiment strip set from Simon Says Stamp. I have it linked below in the video description and over on my blog. Now I'm going to pull in some fairy dust embossing glitter from Brutus Monroe. Any clear glitter embossing powder will work for this. I'm going to tap off any extra, lay it over on my Positively Everything tool, and then I'm going to use that to help hold this sentiment strip in place as I heat emboss this. So what's happening is we're going to get this really nice clear shine over top of our sentiment strip, but because it's a glitter embossing powder, now this sentiment is also sparkly. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a great way to embellish those sentiment strips a bit more, make them extra fancy, and I thought this would look really pretty on top of our flower. So I'll just use a couple of foam squares. These are the regular dimension of foam squares. And so I'll just glue my sentiment right on top of those. And that's going to give it a nice bit of lift off of the flower. Everything's almost done. However, I did, of course, want to add some sequins because if you know me, you know I love to add my sequins. So I pulled out these sequins from Simon Says Stamp. They're just some clear confetti sequins, and I'm using Ultra Bond adhesive to glue them down, and I'm using my tweezers to help make sure I place them in the appropriate locations. So that is my finished card using some fun products from Simon Says Stamp and also the new Saltwater Taffy ink color from Tim Holtz. I love how this paired with the yellows. It's so pretty. Such a unique color combination, and I thought it looked really nice on this flower. I think it's fun to be able to take a technique that you love and use that as a jumping off point for when you're not feeling so creative like I was on this project. And I had fun in the process because I got to enjoy that ink smushing while I was kind of working out all those little kinks that I was somehow managing to get myself knotted up into as I was working on a previous project. I will go back to that previous project at some point, but it was a nice break and I think this card turned out really cool. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for additional inspiration. I'll be back soon with more to share with you all, but until I see you again, I hope everyone has a very wonderful day. Bye!